"Where did you go to, if I might ask?" said Thorin to Gandalf as they rode along. "To look ahead," said he. "And what brought you back in the nick of time?" "Looking behind," said he. "Exactly," said Thorin. But could you be more plain?" "I went to spy on the road. It will soon become dangerous and difficult. Also, I was anxious about replenishing our small stock of provisions. I had not gotten very far, however, when I met a couple of friends of mine from Rivendell." "Where's that?" asked Bilbo. "Don't interrupt," said Gandalf. "You will get there a few days from now, if we're lucky, and find out all about it. As I was saying, I met two of Elrond's people. They were hurrying along in fear of trolls, and it was they who told me that the three of them would come down the mountains and settle in the woods not far from the road, and that they had frightened everyone away from the district, and they waylaid strangers. And I immediately had a feeling as I wanted to back. Looking back, I saw the fire in the distance and made for it. So now you know. Please be more careful next time, or we shall never get anywhere." "Thank you," said Thorin. And now we are on chapter 3. It's called A Short Rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side, and they camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but there was not much in their bags, even with what they had got from the trolls. One morning they forded a river at a wide, shallow place, full of noise of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very near them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and dreary it looked, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders to the tips of the snow-peak gleams. "Is that the mountain?" asked Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He had never seen a thing that looked so big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That's only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and we've got to get through or over or under those somehow before we can come to the wilder land beyond. And it's a deal of a way even from the other side of them to the Lonely Mountain, on the east where Smaug lies on our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo, and just that moment he felt more tired than he remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair and the fire in his favorite sitting room in his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing. Not for the last time. Now Gandalf led the way. "We must not miss the road, or we shall be done for," he said. "We need food, for one thing, and rest in a reasonable safety. Also, it is very necessary to tackle the Misty Mountains on the proper path, or else you'll get lost in them, and have to come back and start at the beginning again, if you ever get back at all." They asked him what he was making for, and he answered, "You are come to the very edge of the wilds, as some of you may know. Hidden somewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives, in his last homely house. I sent a message to my friends, and we are expected." That sounded nice and comforting. But they had not gotten there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees and no valleys and no hills to break the ground in front of them, only the vast slope going slowly up and up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain, a wide land of the color of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of grass green and moss green showing where water might be. Morning passed, afternoon came, but in all silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they saw now that the house may be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down just surprised to see trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies that they could almost leap over, but very deep waterfalls within them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump over nor climb into. There were bogs that, some of them green, pleasant places to look at, with flowers growing bright and tall, but a pony that walked over there with a pack on its back would never come out again. It was indeed a much wider land from the ford to the mountains than you would have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked with white stones, some of which were small, and others were half covered in moss and heather. Altogether, it was a very slow business following the track, even guided by Gandalf, who seemed to know his way about pretty well. His head and beard wagged this way and that, and he looked for stones, and they followed his lead, but they seemed no nearer to the end of the search than when the day began to fail. Tea time was long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped off the slope. "Here it is at last," he called, and the others gathered around him and looked over the edge. They saw the valley far below. They could hear a voice of hurrying water in the rocky bed at the bottom, and the scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped in the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warm as they got lower, and the smell of pine trees made him drowsy, so that every now and again he nodded and nearly fell off or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was a comfortable feeling in twilight. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came at length to the open glade not far above the banks of the stream. Smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars, and they were burning bright and blue. Just then there came a burst of song, like laughter from the trees. "Oh, what are you doing, and where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing, the river is flowing, oh, tra-la-la-la-lally, here down in the valley. Oh, what are you seeking, and where are you making? The faggots are reeking, the bannocks are baking, oh, trill-lily-lolly, the valley is jolly, ha-ha. And where are you going, beards all wagging, no knowing what brings Mr. Baggins and Balin and Dwalin down into the valley in June, ha-ha. Oh, will you be staying, or will you be flying? Your ponies are straying, the daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, to listen and hark till the end of the dark to our tune, ha-ha." So they laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty fair nonsense, I dare say you think it. Not that they would care. They would only laugh all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them in the dark. The darkness deepened. He loved elves, though he seldom met them. He was a little frightened of them, too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even decent enough dwarves, like Thorin and his friends, seem to think him foolish, which is very foolish of them to think, or get annoyed with them, for some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all of their beards. "Well, well," said a voice, "just look, Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony, my dear. Isn't it delicious? Most astonishing and wonderful." Then off they went into another song as ridiculous as the one I have written down in full. At last one, a tall young fellow, came out through the trees and bowed to Gandalf and Thorin. "Welcome to the valley," he said. "Thank you," said Thorin, a bit gruffly. But Gandalf was already off his horse and among the elves, talking merrily with them. "You are a little out of your way," said the elf. "That is, if you are making for the only path across the water to the house beyond. We'll set you right, but you had best get on foot until you're over the bridge. Are you going to stay a bit and sing with us, or will you go straight on? Supper is preparing over there. I can smell the wood fires for cooking." Tired as he was, Bilbo would have liked to stay for a while. Elvish singing is not the thing to miss in June under the stars, not if you care for such things. Also, he would have liked to had a few private words with these people that seemed to know his names and all about him, although he'd never seen them before. He thought their opinion of his adventure might be interesting. Elves knew a lot, and are wondrous folk for news, and know what's going on among the peoples of the land as quick as water flows, or even quicker. But the dwarfs were all for supper as soon as possible just then, and would not stay. On they all went, leading their ponies, till they were brought to a good path, so that the very last brink of the river. It was flowing fast and noisily as mountain streams do in the summer evening, when the sun has been all day on the snow far up above. There was only a narrow bridge of stone, without a parapet, as narrow as a pony could well walk on, and over that they had to go slow and careful, one by one, leading his pony by the bridle. The elves had brought bright lanterns to the shore, and they sang merrily as the party went across. "Don't dip your beard in the foam, father," they cried to Thorin, who was bent almost on his hands and knees. "It is long enough without watering it." "Mind Bilbo doesn't eat all the cakes," they called. "He's too fat to get through any keyholes yet. Hush, hush, good people, and good night," said Gandalf, who came last. "Valleys have ears, and some elves have over-merry tongues. Good night." And so at last they came to the last homely house, and found its doors flung wide. Now it is a strange thing, but things that are good to have and days that are good to spend are soon told about, and not so much to listen to when things are uncomfortable and palpitating and even gruesome, may make a good tale, and take a deal of telling them anyway. They stayed along in the good house 14 days at least, and they found it hard to leave. Bilbo would gladly have stopped there forever and ever, supposing even a wish could have taken him right back to his hobbit hole without any trouble. Yet there was little to tell about their stay. The master of the house was an elf friend, one of those people whose fathers had come into the strange stories before the beginning of history, in the wars of the evil goblins and elves, and the first of men of the north. In those days of our tale, there were still some people who had both elves and heroes of the Norse for ancestors, and Elrond, the master of the house, was their chief. He was as noble and fair in face as an elf lord, as strong as a warrior, as wise as a wizard, as venerable as the king of the dwarves, and as kind as summer. He comes into many tales, but his part of the story in Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see, if we ever get to the end of it. His house was perfect, whether you liked food or sleep or work or storytelling or singing or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Evil things did not come into that valley. I wish I had time to tell you even a few of the tales, or one or two of the songs that they heard in the house. All of them, and the ponies as well, grew refreshed and strong in a few days there. Their clothes were mended, as well as their bruises and their tempers and their hopes. Their bags were filled with food and provisions, light to carry but strong to bring them over the mountain passes. Their plans were improved with best advice. So the time came to Midsummer's Eve, as they were to go again with the early sun in the midsummer morning. Elrond knew all about the runes of every kind. That day he looked at the swords that they had brought from the troll's lair and said, "These are not troll make. These are old swords, very old swords of high elves of the west, my kin, and they were made in Gondlin for the goblin wars. They must have come from the dragon's hoard or the goblin plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city many years ago. This Thorin, the runes the name Orcrist, the goblin cleaver in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, is Glamdring, foe hammer, that the king of the Gondlin once wore. Keep them well." Whence did the trolls get them, I wonder? Said Thorin, looking at his sword in new interest. I could not say, said Elrond, but one may guess that your trolls have plundered other plunderers, or had come from the remnants of old robberies in some hold in the mountains. I have heard that these still forgotten treasures of old may be found in deserted caverns in the mines in Moria, since the dwarfs and goblin war. Thorin pondered these words. I will keep this sword in honor. May it soon cleave goblins once again. That wish is likely to be granted soon enough in the mountains, said Elrond. But show me now your map. He took it and gazed long at it, and shook his head, for he did not altogether approve of the dwarfs and their love of gold. He hated dragons and their cruel wickedness, and he grieved to remember the ruined town of Dale, and its merry bells, and the burned banks of the bright river running. The moon was shining in the broad silver crescent. He held up the map, and the white light shone through it. What is this? He said. There are moon letters here, besides the plain runes that say 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast. What are moon letters? Asked the dwarf, full of excitement. He loved maps, as I have told you before, and he also liked runes and letters and cunning handwriting, though when he wrote himself it was a bit thin and spidery. Moon letters and rune letters, but you cannot see them, said Elrond, not when you look straight at them. They can only be seen when the moon shines on them, and what is more, with the more cunning sort, there must be the moon of the same shape and season as the day when they were written. The dwarves invented them and wrote them with silver pens, as your friends could tell you. These must have been written on a midsummer's eve in a crescent moon a long while ago. What do they say? Said Gandalf and Thorin together, a bit vexed perhaps that Elrond should have found this first, though really there had not been a chance before, and there would not have been another until goodness knows when. Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, read Elrond, and the setting sun will be the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole. Durin, said Thorin. He was the father of fathers of the eldest race of dwarfs, the Longbeards, and my first ancestor. I am his heir. Then what is Durin's day? Said Elrond. The first day of the dwarves' new year, said Thorin. It is, as all should know, the first day of the last moon of autumn on the threshold of winter. We still call it Durin's day when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together, but this will not help us much, I fear, for it passes our skill in these days to guess when such a time will come again. That remains to be seen, said Gandalf. Is there any more writing? None to be seen by this moon, said Elrond, and he finally gave the map back to Thorin, and they went down to the water to see the elves dance and sing upon the Midsummer's Eve. The next morning was Midsummer's morning, and as fair and fresh as could be dreamed, the blue sky, and never a cloud, and the sun dancing on the water. Now they rode away amid the songs of farewell, in good speed, with their hearts ready for more adventure, with the knowledge of the road they must follow over the misty mountains to the land beyond. Next up is Chapter 4. I will see you soon.